5 greatest stories. Number 1.
Hey, Jim, it's great having you on, man. Happy birthday. Is
Thanks.
there anywhere you would like to start?
Yeah, look, I think that the premise of this is storytelling, right, and telling some stories that maybe not everyone has heard. And for me, I think there are a few key stories that have charted my story as a tennis player, my life as a tennis player. And one of the key ones was I received a phone call in my home when I was 14 years old from Nick Bollettieri. And it was a very important phone call. Nick got our number, I think, out of the phone book back then, which is something you could do after I'd made the finals of the Orange Bowl, 14 and unders. And he called up and he asked me and my parents if I was interested in moving down to Bradenton from Dade City, where I was living in Florida, and training with him and the best players in the world. And I jumped at the opportunity. I think a lot of my peers that were there were not necessarily there because they wanted to be, but for me, this was a huge milestone moment, a chance for me to go train along not only the best players of my age group, but also to see what the top professionals of the time were doing and how they were training. So it was a big chance for me to open up my horizons. It was scary because I also was leaving home, and my parents were supportive of me leaving home, but of course would have preferred to have their child in their home instead of shipping them away to a boarding school. So they would drive me down every weekend, on Sunday night, drop me off. They would pick me up on either Friday night or sometimes Saturday morning. So I would be able to come home on some weekends. But for me, that changed a lot of my trajectory as a tennis player and helped me eventually become a professional. And without that, I don't know where I would have ended up. It was a big moment.
That's huge. Yeah. Can you tell us about the transition from junior to pro?
So the juniors to pro, that was another great story. Another point where Nick really had a huge impact on my life. I graduated high school at a very young age. I started school early, and when I graduated high school, I was 16 years of age. So I was able to, thanks to Nick, take a gap year and not go to college straight away like a lot of my peers who were seniors did that were a little bit older. Nick was able to raise some money from some friends and put together a traveling team of 8 of us that were able to go play professional events, the minor league professional events, without giving up our amateur status. So I had a year to try and see if I was good enough to go straight to the pros. And if I wasn't, then I would be able to go play college tennis and still get a scholarship someplace. Within that process of playing in those tournaments, I was able to get my ranking up into around 200 in the world and beat some top players, top 100 players. And at that point, I knew that I was probably going to be treading water if I went to college. So it was going to be better for me to go pro. I was able to secure, because of those results and Nick's backing, I was able to secure some sponsorships that would allow me to pay expenses for my first 3 years on tour and see how I did. So I rolled the dice. And it wasn't as competitive back then as it is today. There weren't as many players around the world trying to make it. So I was able to get into the top 100 pretty quickly. It's something that's a lot harder to do these days. And once you're in the top 100, you're on tour and you're playing in the big tournaments and you're cash flow positive and it sort of progressed from there. But I find it much more challenging for the players these days that were 16, 17 years old, like I was and my generation was, where we were able to break through within 12 months. It's taking longer these days because there's just so much more depth to men's and women's tennis, and players are playing longer. You see a lot more players that are 30 and over in the top 100 in both men's and women's tennis. So it's just hard. There are just fewer spots available to break into. So I'm pretty grateful that I came through at the time that I did.
Number 2.
Jim, can you share a story with us of your best match ever?
My best match ever. Oh man. So my best match ever that I played, I think there was a sequence of 3 matches actually in the 1993 Australian Open where I played about as flawlessly as I could. From the quarterfinals into the finals, I beat Stefan Edberg in the final in 4 sets. I lost 1 set to him. It was the only set I lost that entire tournament. But I think I made something like 25 unforced errors over 3 matches. So that's 10 sets of tennis, including the 1 4-setter and 2 3-setters. against top flight competition. I was just very offensive minded, but my game was very efficient and I didn't make mistakes, and it all felt really good. And for me, that was a pretty incredible sequence, that 93 Australian Open.
Good memories, huh?
Yeah, incredible memories. Yeah, it's not often that you get on a run like that for multiple matches. Sometimes you can get hot and have a perfect match, but to do it for the better part of a week, it seems like we watch the top players now do it all the time, but it sure felt foreign to me back then.
Number 3.
Can you tell us a story about being a Davis Cup player?
Sure. So I'll tell you two Davis Cup stories. I'll tell you sort of my first experience in Davis Cup as a player. I played in Mexico City. I was playing very well. I'd won Indian Wells and Miami back to back, and Davis Cup was the next week. And I was feeling super confident, but I'd never played Davis Cup before. We're playing at about 5,000 feet of altitude, which is very different from playing at sea level in Miami. And I went down there and I played a very good player from Mexico named Luis Herrera, my age. I'd beaten him in Miami the week before in a tough match, but I'd beaten him. But I'd never played against him in altitude with a crowd like he had behind him, and with the pressure of playing for teammates and for the United States tennis fans who love Davis Cup like I do. And I felt strangled out there the first time I played Davis Cup. I was paralyzed in many ways, trying to play, realizing what it meant, and trying to deal with all the elements. And I struggled. I wasn't able to win that match. And thankfully, in Davis Cup, you have your teammates to pick you up. And my teammates were Brad Gilbert and Flack and Seguso, the doubles team, and they were able to win 3 matches for us and get the United States through. So we didn't lose that weekend, but I just remember the sheer terror I felt, and how much energy also I spent watching my teammates play, and how much I wanted them to win, and how much that exhausted me emotionally and physically as well. So it was a great learning experience, and my Davis Cup experience would get better from there. And my last, I had a couple of great kind of capstone performances in Davis Cup from my standpoint later in my career, where I wasn't ranked as high, but I was able to beat Marat Safin in a 5th match when he was up and coming and super talented, but not a Grand Slam champion yet. And he was beating me 6-0, 4-1, 2 breaks, just demolishing me. And I was able to shift my tactics in that match, something that I'd never done as extremely as this. And I hit only slice backhands from some 6-love, 4-1 down the rest of the match. And that seemed to confound him, took rhythm away from him. And I was able to come back and win that match. And that was the 5th match of the tie. So it got us into the next round. And then I was able to win another 5th match in Great Britain against Greg Ruzetsky on a very fast indoor court when Greg was a top 10 player. And that was a 5-setter. And I was able to again, win that clinching match. And those are incredibly precious moments. The chance to win or lose for your team when you have the ball, it was very special. And I love those moments. I love the pressure of them. Once I got past that initial shock of what Davis Cup actually felt like, because you can watch it, which we did passionately at Bolletari's. We all crowded around the TV and watched the Davis Cup matches. But until you're actually out there in your own skin feeling that pressure, you don't really know what it's like. And it was something else. And I definitely remember the terror of that initial moment in Mexico City.
What's the difference between playing for yourself and playing Davis Cup for your country?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a good question, Dominique, because we're an individual sport by and large, right? Especially when you're playing singles. But when you're playing for your teammates, people that you respect, and people that most weeks you're competing against, and now you're competing with, that's very special. And the week leading up, when you're practicing together and playing cards together and spending all your time together, those are magic moments as well that I really cherish. And when the chair umpire calls out game United States or game Mexico, it has a different weight to it. And it makes you realize that you're playing for something more than yourself. And you're constantly reminded of that. Every change of ends, when they call the scores, you go to sit down, you know which nation just won that game. So it just feels different, and it has a different responsibility to it. And because it's something that we don't do all the time, I think it's something that those of us lucky enough to play Davis Cup or Fed Cup in the women's side, we cherish those moments because they're rare.
Number 4.
Later on, you became a Davis Cup captain. What was that like?
That was a great experience, being on the other side of things with Davis Cup, being the one who was trying to help the players navigate through those challenges and try and use the experiences that I'd had as a player, the good and the bad, to try and at least understand emotionally what the players were going through and help them be more settled. And it was a great learning experience for me as well, too, just from a communication standpoint, understanding that you could say the exact same sentence with the exact same intonation to two different players and have them take it in very different ways. The way that information is interpreted varies from player to player. And of course, coaches that have far more experience than I had at the time, they would know that, but I had to learn that on the job. And I made some mistakes early on, and learned from them. Trying to give too much information to a team like the Bryan brothers, who are so wonderfully independent and are so comfortable with each other. They don't need a lot of input from someone else. I learned how to back off from them and give them space to operate so they could be at their best. And then there are other players like John Isner who liked having more information, came from that background of their college coach really leaning into them during matches and helping them along. So I just learned how to be a better captain as things went on. I think I was able to organize the practices and all that stuff better as you go. But ultimately, it was just a real honor to wear the United States on my back and to be there in the trenches with the players and try and help us do the best we can. It was a real thrill.
What was your best, your most fun memory as a captain?
Well, our best win was when we went into Switzerland and a team of John Isner and Marty Fish and Mike Bryan, because Bob wasn't available. Bob's wife was having a baby. So Mike Bryan played doubles with Marty Fish, and Ryan Harrison was our fourth player who didn't play but was ready to if needed. So we had a good team, but we were playing Federer and Wawrinka. And it was prior to Wawrinka taking on Magnus Norman as his coach and elevating to a Grand Slam champion, but he was still a perennial top 20 player and a wonderful clay court player. And we played them indoors on clay in Switzerland in the dead of winter. And it was just a thrill because Fed is Fed and the fans were amazing. And we were able to sweep them 3-0. And that for me was our best performance. We had a few really good ones, but that was a standout for me. Just to be able to win on especially on foreign ground against a player and a team of that magnitude was magic. It really was.
The people at home who've never been to a big tournament like the French Open or the US Open or something like that, what do players do when it rains and they can't play?
So it's changed over the years because we didn't have iPhones or Androids or anything like that back in the day. There was a lot more card playing. I remember playing chess with Miloslav Machir when I was a young player in the Wimbledon locker room when we had like 5 straight days of rain, and we'd bring books to read. We'd do crossword puzzles. There were backgammon games. There were lots of different ways you would fill time. But if you go in the locker rooms today, it's mostly players on their phone. And that they tend to isolate a little bit more. Nadal is probably the one exception to that. He, on match day, even at the slams, which is where I tend to see these players more often because that's when I'm around, he's pretty much every day in the player restaurant playing Parcheesi with his team. So he actually does bring a board game with him and they play every day, either before his match or before practice or after practice. But that's his routine. He likes to do that. But most of the other players, if they're just killing time, I think it's mostly on their phones.
Number 5.
Later on, you started working in broadcasting. How did that start?
So broadcasting happened very organically for me. I was just retired, and Turner Network Sports, so TNT, took over the Wimbledon rights from HBO in 2000. And they were looking for a new team. They didn't have anyone set. So I got a call from my tennis agent saying, hey, one of the guys at IMG who works in TV says they're looking for someone to do broadcasting at Wimbledon for TNT. Would you be interested? And I said, I hadn't really thought about it. Just kind of retired, but yeah, it kind of sounds like fun. Let's give it a try. I thought it'd be something I would try at some point, maybe not this soon. So I went over there with no idea what I was doing, but surrounded by professionals. I had an amazing team of veterans that coddled me. Marv Albert was my first play-by-play partner. Mary Carrillo I got to work with, who I still do at Tennis Channel, who's amazing. We had Ernie Johnson, who does hosts the basketball show for TNT. He was our studio host. And then we had people like Barry McKay, who I knew well from the world of tennis, also around. So it was, it was a very comfortable environment for an uncomfortable situation for me. And I was terrible at it. The first thing they had me do was to interview my friends. They had me interview before the tournament started, Pete and Andre and Michael and like all the guys that I grew up with. And it's just so weird because now I'm sitting there in a suit and I was just in the locker room with them like 6 months earlier. And I'm asking them questions that they know that I know the answers to. And we're just like, we're kind of looking at each other like, is this a fun house? Like, what are we doing here? So I was definitely terrible at it. And but I got better because I had people around me again that just helped nudge me and point me in the right direction. And I love tennis. And when you come right off the tour, you know a lot about the players. You know all the little ticks and secrets and stuff. So there's a real edge to doing it when you just come off the tour. You have a lot of really valid information that's hard to come by. So I started doing it in 2000, and I've been doing it ever since. So it's been really fun to stay involved in tennis in that aspect too.
While working in broadcasting, what would you say was the most fun story?
Well, just to be present at so many of these amazing moments that we've witnessed, the historical changes that we've seen in tennis, the records falling, what Serena's been able to accomplish, what Roger and Rafa and Novak have accomplished, seeing Andy Murray break through and win Wimbledon for the first time in 77 years that a man had done that. Now, those are the energy you get around moments like that are just magnificent. And I think it's hard to pick out one in particular because there are just so many that jump at you. Seeing Federer win Roland Garros when he desperately wanted to do it. Moments like that are just they jump. They really do. So there's a lot to choose from. We're lucky as tennis fans. We've seen so much in the last 15 years.
Thank you for watching Tennis on Demand. Please remember to subscribe.